Welcome everybody to episode 6 of Small Stages, Big Sounds, and tonight I'm joined by Johnny Biggs, who's going to have a discussion with us about the music scene around the Bournemouth area. So,
Yes,
hi Johnny, how are you?
Yeah, I'm pretty good, thank you.
So, first up, the news that's gone on this week, this big news in my part of the world, is that Steelhouse have announced their initial lineup, starting off with bands like Asomve, who sound a bit like Motorhead, Marissa and the Moths, quite different, Wolfsbane, who we all know, and the Wild Hearts. And Ginger's actually playing in a local venue in a couple of weeks' time. And then there's Muddy Brook, who I've never come across, our favourite, Scarlet Rebels, Lita Ford, and Wasp. And on the Sunday then, so they've got Hit Trake, Tail Gunner, Treatment, and These Wicked Rivers. So it's a pretty nice mix at the moment. We'll wait to see what else comes along. I mean, obviously the other big news of the week was the sad death of Quincy Jones, who's probably influenced an awful lot of people's musical tastes over the years. Anyway, that's enough of the news. We're going to have a quick chat to Johnny about what's going on in the Bournemouth area, the bands that he's aware of. Over to you, John.
Yeah, sounds good. So for everyone's awareness, I grew up in the Bournemouth area. Was involved in music there for a very long time before I eventually moved up to the northwest about 10, 15 years ago. Done a lot of stuff with music in the past over there. My first gig, I remember really well. I went over to Portsmouth Guildhall, which was, it looked like a really grand venue from the outside, but you get inside and it looked just like almost like a regular theatre. I saw Franz Ferdinand there, who assuming a lot of people will remember, really big in early 2000s, still going now, I believe. They've got a new album coming out in January next year. They were supported by the Kills, who were quite interesting then. But the band that always stood out from that was a one-man band who supported them, who was called Bob Log the Third. I don't know if you've ever come across him.
No.
But he would rocked up onto stage wearing like this full suit. He had cymbals strapped to his knees, and it was just a one-man band. And then he would get someone up on stage, sit them on his knee, and carry on playing. So that was really stands in my mind as like the sort of formative music experience for me down there. Because particularly growing up in Bournemouth, it was a very small town, so we didn't get a lot of the big gig traffic come through. It would often go to cities like Southampton, Portsmouth. We'd be really lucky if we got any big bands. The biggest venue that we have and still have in Bournemouth is the Bournemouth International Centre, which has had some really big acts in the past. I know my stepdad went to see Meatloaf there in like the early 90s. But when I was growing up, we could get the odd bands through. I think the biggest one that I remember would have been Bowling for Soup. They came through in 2007, did their Get Happy tour with the Bloodhound Gang, which I think was probably the last opportunity to see the Bloodhound Gang in the UK. But they were supported by a very young Zebrahead at the time, who have since gone on to do really big things. I caught them at Slam Dunk Festival last year, and they've blown up ever since. Yeah, there's just loads of venues. So if we were trying to get out of Bournemouth, we'd always go to probably Southampton. It's about half-hour train journey away. I distinctly remember we went to a little venue that was called Talking Heads, which is a really tiny little pub in Portswood, I think it was, which is just outside Southampton. Tiny venue, you sort of walked in, there was a bar there, and you went round the bar, and there was a small room in the back. And that's where I managed to see the Anti-Noah League in 2008, which was amazing for me. I was really into my punk music when I was younger, so seeing a band as big as that in such a tiny venue, there can't have been more than 100 people in that room. It's a fantastic venue, though. They were supported by a band called Union X as well, who were a Southampton punk band, who I think are still trying to keep going. They've got adverts out at the moment for drummers. But yeah, that was a really good venue. Unfortunately, in 2016, that venue closed down. It moved to another pub in the centre of Southampton, so it got a better location in the centre of the city. But unfortunately, it just wasn't used, wasn't getting the support from the locals, so that actually closed permanently in 2018, which was a shame because it really was like one of the corner houses really of the Southampton music scene at that time.
I won't say what my first gig was. Well, all right then, if you insist. It was Deep Purple Mark III. It was 1974 in the Shepherd's Bush Empire. So there you are.
So I actually got to see Deep Purple. That would have been 2008, I think, at the Bournemouth International Centre. They came through with supported by Styx and what was left of Thin Lizzy at the time as well.
So, are you aware of any bands from the area that are up and coming at the moment?
Yeah, I think there's quite a few really. So the first one that stands out is Metaprism. They came on the scene quite a few years ago, but played Bloodstock. I think it was either last year or the year before. But they're really good. Last week I was in Chester of all places, seeing Wednesday 13 and a band called South of Salem as well was supporting. That they seem to be really on a bit of a rise at the moment, from strength to strength. But other than that, I think those are probably the really big ones that stand out for me. We had lots of attempts at little local bands when I was growing up. Certainly friends that I went to school with were in a whole bunch of different bands that don't really exist anymore. Although some of them have formed a band that is currently going, who call themselves Meringue, and they are a tribute to all things that were on Kerrang in the early 2000s. So they are sort of a touring tribute act, playing things like Sum 41, Blink-182, all of that good stuff. Very similar to another band that are around the northwest called Kerranged, who do exactly the same thing. It seems to be the way to go at the moment.
There appears to be a lot more traction for tribute acts than there are for original bands.
Yeah.
and this is, well, it's sad really, because the tribute acts get paid a lot of money. Not enough anyway. But for talented musicians, to make your own way, it's a long haul.
Yeah, absolutely.
Talking about bands that I've been following for a while, it's like Florence Black. I first saw them in 2015, and it's only this last year, since the launch of the first album, that they've actually taken traction, and they just toured Europe. But it's a long haul for a band starting out. And it's getting harder because the venues are getting fewer.
Yeah, it's almost twofold, isn't it? You've got the reduction in venues means that they're not getting the same sort of exposure, and certainly the lack of support for local venues. Bands aren't getting that turnover of people to get the word out. And the way people discover music now, it's very easy to get lost in your own echo chamber, I like to call it, because people use things like Spotify and those sorts of things, and it will recommend bands within the sort of niche that you've been listening to. It's, unless you're actively looking now, I think it's a lot harder to find new music. That's why I think Bloodstock in particular are very good for that, with their Metal to the Masses competition they run, that really does force people to go out and seek new music, and you get a whole stage that's dedicated to bands that are up and coming and new.
So do you cover any of the Battle of the Bands in your part of the world?
Not recently. I did go to I think it was 2019, I think it was. There was a Metal to the Masses heat that was hosted in Bournemouth. I went to that. I ended up arriving slightly late. I got stuck in traffic when I was on the way down there, because it's now a 350-mile drive to get down there. But I got there, and I got there late. I got there for the last competing band, and the special guests. The special guests for that were Crown, who are a fantastic death metal band. I think they're from your sort of neck of the woods, actually. They're certainly from Wales somewhere. And I was really disappointed. So by the time I arrived, the last band was on, and there were a handful of people in the room. It was a £5 or entry, so I was quite happy to go and pay. But they said, "No, you don't need to pay now." And I was like, "Well, no, I want to support the band that's here." So I think that was a little bit disappointing, and I hope that it was a one-off for that event. Certainly they went ahead and did the grand final there, and that was quite successful by all accounts.
There are, like you say, there are so many bands around it. It gets difficult. And I tend to use Spotify if I'm going to a gig, and I try to discover the music of the bands on the undercard.
Yeah.
I listen to it regularly for the stuff that I like, but it also gives me the opportunity to discover those bands that are, like I said, I'll have a listen out to the bands that have been outlined for Steelhouse.
Yeah.
So my son's a musician, he's playing tomorrow, so I'll have a look at the band that's playing with him tomorrow. So, it's a way of finding things. But what I like about the Music Venue Trust is they are pushing much more of the grassroots music scenes.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether you've come across the resource that they put on. They're called Hereby.
No.
Well, let me show you this. There we go. This is an AI resource developed by the Music Venue Trust.
Yeah.
And it covers all types of music and activities across the UK and North America.
Oh, well.
So if you were going to go on holiday and you wanted to find something to do, you can just click on this. You can click wherever you are. Sorry, I'm on the wrong bit. If you click Bournemouth there, it'll give you these things here.
I bet that's the anvil there, isn't it?
I'll find out now.
And the old fire station would be my
guess.
There we
are.
Yep, an anvil over the road.
There we are.
Perfect.
So they're still there.
Yep. And you should have the Boscombe Opera House as well. That was bought out by the O2 Academy.
There you are. Chaplin's.
That's one that wasn't particularly big when I was there.
And then there's Bournemouth Pavilion, which, goes on the International Centre.
The BIC, yeah.
Vault. It's a nightclub. Smoking Aces. And
that's a relatively new bar, that one. As is the Four Horsemen. They're both, I think they're both predominantly bars, but they do have some live music as well. Whereas Anvil is a rock bar, but it has an entire music venue downstairs.
The other thing about it as well is if you were going away, you could you pick music. You could pick whatever type of music you're looking for.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. You could look for theatre, to look at what theatre's around. Family events, see what family events are around. And also sport, which is incredible.
Yeah.
So it's not just about the music, although that's its prime aim.
Yeah.
Its prime use. And like I said, if you decided you want to go to New York, just put New York in for fun. Not that I've ever been, but there you are. You say, right, what's on there? There we are. Oh, there we are. Wherever your hotel is, you can find music or anything that you like. Theatre, everything.
That's really...
It's incredible. And I mentioned this to an awful lot of people, and everybody goes, what? So you can see it is, I'll stop sharing now, but it makes life a lot easier for music fans, also for bands. So if bands want to go on a tour, they can look to see what venues are in the area they want to go to and pick it up from there. So they could do like a local tour where they're going to do half a dozen venues or 3 venues over a weekend.
Yeah.
And not have to travel a gazillion miles between one and the other.
And I suppose not have to be at the mercy of a promoter finding those venues for them either.
Yeah. So it is a really useful resource.
Yeah, anyway. I'll definitely keep an eye on that one.
Like I said, I thought, when I came across, I thought, wow. I mean, I know the venues in my area that I go to.
Yeah.
But then, even bearing with that, there are 2 new venues that have opened in this area in the last month, which is a really bucket trend.
Yeah. I say, because I now live in Barrow-in-Furness, which is probably about as far from Bournemouth as I could have got.
Well, it begins with B.
Yeah, and that's got maybe 1 or 2, maybe as many as three little music venues. But yeah, I'll certainly be keeping an eye on that to see what's on in the local area as well.
Yeah, I just pulled Barrow up just out of interest. You're right, 2.
There we go.
So, what was the last gig you went to?
Last gig for me would have been, last week. I went to Chester, to the live rooms there. Where I saw Wednesday 13 performing Murder Dolls, which was fantastic. I'd actually seen him last year in Las Vegas doing the same thing. But to go from what was actually a very small pub venue in Vegas to a very small pub venue in the UK was really good. Supported by South of Salem as well, which was great.
It's a small pub venue. That must have been a hell of a show.
Yes, yeah, it was really good. It was absolutely rammed as well. The only problem I had with that particular venue is that the entrance is on the side of the venue, isn't it? So everyone sort of crams in and you get a bit stuck. If the entrance at the back, like facing the stage, people could spread out a little bit more. But other than that, it was fantastic. And for a cold night, we kept nice and warm in there as well.
Yeah, you're saying I went to a very small venue last week called Tiny Rebel in Cardiff. which was basically a pub with a capacity of 85. See the Hot Dam
Yeah.
and a band called Among Liars.
Nice.
So they were completely contrasting bands.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the Hot Dam is pop rock with attitude, with real serious attitude.
Yeah, and there were a combination of... There were two bands combined together, didn't they, for the Hot Dam, if I remember rightly?
Tequila Mockingbird and the Amorettes.
That was it.
Yeah. They're nice girls, they're talented musicians, but their music, it literally is, it's girls with attitude. But Among Liars was very punky, completely different.
Oh, okay.
So if you see them around, it's worth... Like I said, I'd go and see the Hot Dam because they're just fun. They had a giant inflatable unicorn crowd surfing around the room. But Among Liars were very, very, very punky, very... I suppose I compare them to a bit like Nothing More.
Okay, yeah.
So quite different.
Yeah.
But there we are. Just an interesting thing to see what's going on. So... have you got anything else you'd like to talk about while we're here? Where's your next gig?
Trying to think what our next gig is. So, obviously, being in the Northwest now, I think our next one, we're over to the new Co-op Live Arena for Slipknot in December. I think it's the next one for us.
Not my cup of tea.
No, we saw Sum 41 there last week though, and that was also really good. It's actually a really impressive venue. I know this is all about sort of small grassroots venues, but the Co-op Live Arena, for what is a custom built event space, there's a lot more amenities and things than in somewhere like the NEC or something like that. So that was quite good. I'm sure there's some local gigs coming up as well, but it's predominantly tribute acts. I think last week we had the northern tribute to Slipknot called Slipknot, which is good. I think we've got Pretend coming up as well.
Well, I've got Blackstone Cherry. A week Sunday.
Fantastic.
I like as you can tell.
Yeah.
I've seen them on every tour since about 2012. But there we are. That's my cup of tea. But there we are. Well, thanks for your time, John.
No, thank you.
I'll tart this up a little bit.
Yep.
Add some images and what have you to see, just to give it a bit more fruit.
Are you going to have anything left after that?
You'd be surprised. But there we are. So that's it. We're done for the recording now. I'm going to press that to stop for now.